Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Marketplace Session 1. This is Room 6. My name... good morning, everybody. I think the live lights just come on. This is Marketplace Session 1, Room 6. My name is Johnny Bloor, aka Jonathan Bloor. On the screen, I am a Low Carbon Devon Research Fellow in the power electronics sector and happy to be here at the SEI conference. So got a couple of sessions here for you today, and so if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat, and hopefully I can pick those up throughout, and we can have a Q&A at the end. We've got two presentations. They're about 15 minutes long for each one, and there'll be a Q&A after each session. So 15 minutes for the presentation plus 5 to 10 minutes for a Q&A, and then it'll change over to our next speaker. So we're running now from 11:10 to midday. You can stay in this room for both talks or move around the platform. It's quite exciting. So the first speaker we have today is Mr. Ben Allerton and Ms. Helen Scholes from Co-cars Limited, and they are based in Exeter. And their presentation this morning is called Creating Spaces for People, Zero Emission Shared Mobility for All. So I'd like to welcome Ben and Helen to the stage, and we can kick off. Hi there, morning Ben, morning Helen.
Good morning.
Hi, morning. Just about to see if I lean over.
Well, welcome to the marketplace session this morning. Without further ado, I think I'll hand over to both of you. So thanks very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Johnny.
Just bear with us while we get our presentation up and running. A moment, hopefully. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. As I said, my name's Ben Allerton. I'm the Partnership Manager here at Co-cars. To give you a bit of background as to who we are Co-cars and Co-bikes. We are a not-for-profit social enterprise business based in Exeter. We offer an affordable and on-demand low-carbon bike and car share scheme.
And by doing this, we're actively creating more space in our towns and in our cities. Over to a moment, small technical
issues. There we go. As I'm sure you guys are aware, we are currently seeing a lot of problems being caused by the way we choose to move around. Rather than read out the stats on here, just to give you a bit of an idea, that a third of urban spaces at the moment are currently devoted to cars and car infrastructure. And each of the vehicles on the road costs on average £3,000 a year, and that's before we get the fuel costs. So
all of this is for something that is only used on average just 4% of the time, which I think is quite a staggering statistic, particularly when you compare that to the fact we use our mobile phones around 40% of the time. Feels like a lot more often if you're me. And that's something we can put in our back pockets, whereas cars are something that take up a huge amount of space on our streets. So how do we change things? Well, I guess it's not really rocket science. What we need to do is urgently move away from devoting so much of our space to things and shift to people-centered places and spaces.
What's our solution? We offer a virtuous circle of sustainable, affordable, on-street and on-demand shared mobility services. We work with individuals, businesses, housing developers, councils, colleges, universities, and provide a wide variety of mobility solutions. So what do we provide? By the end of this year, we'll have over 50 electric and low emission cars across the southwest, from locations from Truro to Salisbury, but the largest of the network being based here in Exeter. In addition to that, by the end of this year, we will have over 150 electrically assisted bikes at over 20 locations across Exeter. The locations range from transport hubs like bus and train stations to city centre, other prime locations like the university, the college, IKEA, and Aldi, I think in the next month, should have some bikes outside one of their stores here in Exeter. Our services work particularly well when they form part of an onward travel solution. So, for example, if we take St David's Station here in Exeter, if somebody comes into the station, gets off a train, they can take one of the bikes from outside the station. They can then cycle up the hill into town on electrically assisted, of course. They'll get there without any sweat or any out of breathness. They can then go to work for the day, park the bike in one of the docks in the city centre, which ends their hire immediately. Then go to work for the day. At the end of the day, pick up another bike from that dock or another dock, cycle back to the station, and again plug it back in and end their hire there and then. Give you a bit of an idea of a snapshot of some of the companies that we're working with at the moment. And we're partnered with, like I said, a lot of councils on there, housing developers, but also large businesses as well. So how does it work? Very simply, we use simple, smart and intuitive technology. If we look at the bike, first of all, because that's the simplest and most straightforward way of doing it, you literally download an app onto your phone, you register, you then open your app, find a bike at any of the racks around, hover your camera over the QR code on the back of the bike, which unlocks the bike. You then get on, ride it, as long as you like, return it back to that dock or another dock if you like. Either is fine. And then as soon as you push the bike back into the dock again, it ends your hire and you purely pay for what you've ridden. So if it's a quarter of an hour ride, you literally pay for the quarter of an hour. Cars, exactly the same way. You have to join. First of all, with the cars, you need to book the car from any of the sites around Exeter, first of all. Once it's booked, you go to the car, unlock it with your mobile device, drive the car around for your journey, return it to the same car parking bay, and then as soon as you return it, you end your hire, and exactly the same again, you pay for exactly what you've used, and prices for cars start from about £4 an hour.
I'd like to circle back for a moment to that stat about a third of urban space given over to cars and car infrastructure. And you might have noticed on that previous slide as well, on average, a car club car removes between 6 and 10 private cars from the road. And we personally have seen a 400% increase in usage of our co-bike scheme over the last year. Both of these are really impressive. That's clearly having a contribution to improving the amount of urban space available. But clearly there's room for improvement, so we can make solutions even more effective when we keep the allocation of space. So this is where I'd like to introduce the concept of mobility hubs. Now, I don't know who's in the room at the moment. I can just see those little numbers on the screen. So you may be, I may be preaching to the choir here. But for those of you who may not have come across this concept before, the definition of a mobility hub is a recognisable place with an offer of different and connected transport modes supplemented with enhanced facilities and information features to both attract and benefit the traveller. And there's several characteristics as well of mobility hubs. So, something that identifies it as a mobility hub, rather obviously, co-location of public and shared mobility modes, and I think really importantly, the redesign of space to reduce private car space and improve the surrounding public realm. So from our perspective, I think, we're in a pretty unique position when it comes to things like this with shared mobility services. We're already thinking about how we cluster our services. We offer more than one mode of transport. So from a purely commercial point of view, it makes complete sense to give our customers a better customer experience by allowing them to switch between our cars and bikes. We can situate them anywhere there's space to do so. When we have an e-bikes and station, we have our electric cars. We also have public charge points. So one side of our charge point will be available for people to charge their cars, again, increasing the capacity of our services. And we can also link in other sustainable transport options, such as trains and buses, and actively look to do so. The slide that Ben showed with some of the partners you work with, as you'll see, there's a number of transport providers listed on there. And we are very happy to develop strong relationships with public transport operators. They see what we do as a benefit and enhancement of their services. And as Ben mentioned previously, the whole idea of onward travel, first mile, last mile, making it easier for people to connect. We've seen a massive upsurge of interest in mobility hubs with housing developers, local authorities, all the partners we work with, because they're increasingly becoming part of the conversation and looking at how space can be fairly allocated. And as you may be aware, Plymouth itself is looking to create a network of mobility hubs across the city as part of the Transforming Cities Fund. By putting in this infrastructure, it will help underpin the development of a full mobility as a service platform. So again, for those who may not have come across this concept before, this is the idea that effectively, much like you buy broadband or other packaged services, you can choose the transport you need, you can have it all available on an app, you pay a monthly subscription, and then you just access what you need when you need it. Now, people, sort of individuals, organisations are taking steps towards this. Working across operators is one of the more challenging aspects. We personally, at the moment, are working very hard on looking at how we integrate our cars and bikes onto a single digital platform, so our members can be members of both services rather than having to have separate memberships, and that allows the interoperability of both modes of transport really easily. So it's something that there's a huge amount of work happening at the moment and is a really exciting development within this space. But I think the great thing about mobility hubs is actually they're already here. You might not just recognise them from what I said as that definition. So here is a great example in Exeter. This is Central Station. Some of you may be familiar with it. Central Station, you've got a train, obviously. Directly outside, you've got a bus stop. And then just to the side of that, you've got a Co-bike bike station. And just off the side of that picture, there is a Co-cars electric car location as well, with 2 cars, all of which are some of our most heavily used in our network because of that interoperability between the services. This is also a great example of improvements to the public realm as well. So, you know, again, for people who've lived in the southwest or familiar with Exeter, Central Station looked very different a few years ago. There was parking right outside the station. It was a really congested and clustered area. There was a concerted effort by Devon County Council to improve the public realm, to create this piazza, and the whole area has flourished as a result. You've got cafes there now, you've got bars, people sit outside, you know, it's a place you want to dwell and linger, and at the same time, people have access to all the services. And this is something that's being now continually built on too, as part of looking at prioritising active travel throughout the city. Queen Street, which the station is situated on, we're now looking at prioritisation of cycling. So there's a whole temporary infrastructure at the moment to see how this works, with priority given to cyclists, restrictions on car use. And it's really transforming the whole space. It's making the most of the existing infrastructure and helping give people the space they deserve and the transport options they need. So I think it's something that we're proud and excited to be involved with. It's something that we're seeing a lot more of. It's something that we love to talk to more partners about. And we are working with an increasing amount of partners across the southwest and further afield. And I think I'd just like to leave you with a thought. You know, what would you do with all that extra space on your street if all this happened? Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Helen. I mean, that's, you know, what will you do with all of this extra space? It's a great ending question there. And I mean, yeah, what would we do? I mean, the mind really has to sort of, the imagination has to really start working, really, to start to fill in these potentials that might happen. So we've got some interesting questions in the chat, which I'd maybe like to propose to you. Thank you very much for your presentation. Let's first move to Maria McCann. She said, are there any plans for expansion into or around Plymouth?
Oh, that's a great question, Maria. Thank you for asking. We do already have a couple of cars within Plymouth. We are working with housing developers at the moment. There will be more cars, electric cars going in. Well, look out for some news coming hopefully next month. We're obviously engaged with Plymouth City Council and other partners looking at the Transforming Cities Fund, looking at the opportunities around the mobility hubs that they are interested in creating over the next 2 to 3 years. So I'm hoping that, you know, in the not too distant future, we will be a lot more active within Plymouth. And if you'd like to get in touch with us directly to discuss any of that in more detail, we're delighted to hear from you.
That's great. I mean, you know, yeah, I think there's lots is going to happen in Plymouth in the next few years around the Transforming City Fund, and I hope, you know, Co-cars are a part of that. Really, it's yeah, it's quite exciting. Really, another question here from Grant Sherman. What about the options for people that don't have smartphones? Because this has come up recently in a kind of general accessibility to all these things that we want to do in a low carbon sort of, you know, personal electric light vehicle, bikes, e-car, you know, whatever it is. I don't have I'm not into apps. I don't have an app because that's, we always say there's an app for everything. And obviously there's an app for mobility. So we talked about it a little bit recently about, is there, can you just phone up and say, hi, I'd like you to deliver me an electric car? I mean, what's the solution for people that don't want to do smartphone apps?
Currently, our cars, you can also access them with a smart card, so an RFID card, like you would with a smart card on the bus.
Lovely.
Our bikes are run purely through an app, so it's through our provider, a company called Nextbike, who operate bike schemes across Europe and also in the UK. So that is purely app-based. To be transparent, Grant, we are moving more towards a purely digital solution, and I think you will find that across all mobility providers. And this is particularly relevant if you are looking to implement mobility as a service product, which again, as I've said, there's a huge amount of interest in, because being able to deliver that really does rely on digital integration. And I appreciate it's always going to be a challenge in some instances about how people access those services. I think certainly with the cars, we are looking to continue having that smart card option, but we will be pushing more towards an app-based solution. And certainly when it comes to being able to integrate memberships, it's far more sense for us to have a single app where people can access both the cars and bikes through. So it's a bit of a mixed picture, but I'm sorry it's not more positive news. It's something we try and be sensitive to, but it's also something where the technology is kind of guiding the industry, I think, in some ways.
No, I understand. No, thank you for your answer. I had a thought about your project and thought, Co-cars utility option. Maybe I've got some plywood I want to get from the builders merchants, or some. Could I hire a Co-cars utility truck? Which
wow.
There you go.
I tell you what, you're asking all the right questions here. So we currently have one van as part of our network in Exeter.
Right.
I'll be honest, it's not currently an electric van. The market with electric vans is changing really quickly, so we're not quite at a point where the battery capacity and the size of the van match. But we do want to move to e-vans as soon as we possibly can, and then we will offer more. But another one of our services is co-delivery, which are e-cargo bikes. So these are a great option. So at the moment, these are done. We operate this as a B2B or B2C service, delivering goods between businesses or independent food and drink for independent retailers to consumers. But we are really keen to look at how we can expand on the e-cargo bikes for something that people can hire as well. Because some of them, when I say bikes, there's a real mix. We have some that look like little minivans. They've got a huge capacity. But again, because they're electrically assisted, you can carry a pretty heavy load, but you're still pedaling.
And not even realise.
Yeah, not even realise it.
Quite impressive.
But we do have that van option, and that is very popular for people as well, just for moving all sorts of stuff around.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't own a vehicle, or you just there's other bits and bobs you just want to do sometimes, isn't it? Apart from into the shops, you might want to go and pick up a washing machine or I don't know, I'll probably get it delivered, but it's an interesting thought of mine, but I have lots of those, and probably following on from this idea of sort of sharing in some way the bike or something like that. I know that you can is the ideas around carpooling, is that a kind of potential as well, in terms of the hiring? You could then pool, say, hey, look, I'm going on this journey, would anyone like to pool, and then they could all kind of click in and join in and pick up, and would it be interesting, like Uber pool?
I guess, I mean, lift share is a slightly different model. So not necessarily something that we are in the best position to work with. I think as working with an organisation like Lift Share, there's absolutely possibilities. So again, it's that collaboration aspect. And I think that's something that you see a lot across the co-mobility space, is a lot of businesses don't see themselves in a competitive environment. It's more actually supporting each other. I think if people are interested in co-mobility, I encourage them to go and look at an organisation called Como, which is sort of the umbrella representative body for all co-mobility businesses, and the website is como.org.uk, and there you can find out a lot more information about how all these different systems work and how they complement each other.
Great. No, it's really exciting. And just one little question here from Kit Harbottle saying, what are your your photos had an on-street car club reserved spaces, and they're asking, you know, are there any problems with nearby homeowners and getting these agreed, etc. You know.
Wow. So yes, that is. So we have to go through traffic regulation order process, which for anybody who works with the local authority will be aware of this. So effectively planning permission, but for a car parking space, because all of our cars have a dedicated bay. Right. However, what we often find is we get letters of support rather than letters of complaint, because people actually want our services. We're involved in a project at the moment, Rapid Charging Devon, which is bringing rapid on-street charging along with Co-cars to a number of locations across the city. And with that, we've seen a lot of letters of support where not only are residents getting access to rapid charging as we move towards EVs, but also getting access to cars like ID3s, which are what we're introducing to our fleet now. So they kind of get the best of both worlds. So there's a lot of positivity around it, which from our point of view is obviously fantastic to see. That's great. No, I can feel that. Like, it's a great project, and I'd like to thank you both, Ben and Helen, for your presentation this morning from Co-cars Limited, and you know, look forward to seeing you over the next couple of days on and off the platform, and you know, but yeah, thanks very much. It's been really an interesting presentation. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. So that's session 1 on this marketplace session this morning in room 6. My name is Jonathan Bloor. I'm a low carbon Devon research fellow in the power electronics sector, so very much interested in mobility, electric vehicles, electric bikes, batteries. Yeah, even built my own bike once, which is great fun to cycle into Plymouth. I always bring that up. I don't know why, but it's this great thing, you know, lithium-ion batteries, and it's just changed the world in lots of ways. So that was Ben and Helen from Co-cars Limited. Really nice presentation there, and nice to see there's some real positive engagement around, you know, car sharing and bike sharing, and you know, be interesting to see how that kind of integrates with the wider transport infrastructure. So we're moving now into our second part of this marketplace session 1. We have another guest here, and this gentleman is called Fabian Reitemeyer, and he is from the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, and he has a presentation this morning on the Urban Transport Calculator, and this is a quantification of carbon impacts of the urban transport section, which I think is going to be a really interesting topic to us all. So yeah, we've got about, again, 10 to 15 minutes of presentation from Fabian, and then we'll move into a Q&A session of about 5 to 10 minutes. So yeah, welcome Fabian, nice to see you.
Hi, nice to see you. Thanks.
Nice to see you, great. And yeah, well, that's my introduction over and done with. So over to you, and look, thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here today. Yeah, I'm Fabian Reitemeyer, as you already said, from the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, and I will present you today the Urban Transport Calculator, and also give you some insights into the development of that tool, and also to the European Union project 2050 Climate Friendly Mobility in Cities, because our calculator and also the city of Plymouth are associated with that project. So maybe first some words about myself. I'm a scientist at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. Maybe some of you already know it. It's in Berlin, in Potsdam, near Berlin. I'm part of the working group Urban Transformations. And on the right graphic, you see our working place. It's on the Telegrafenberg, which is a small mountain, at least for Northern Germans, it's a mountain, maybe also for you English guys. And my basic questions, or my basic questions which follows my work are: how do we achieve climate-friendly urban mobility? And also some qualitative and quantitative considerations. What kind of future mobility do we want, and how do we need to reform urban planning? So with the tool I will present, we want to help cities to test their measures for their mitigation potential. So that's what we are doing in the Interreg project 2050 Climate City. The project has been running since September 2019 and will continue until September next year. And as I said, it's funded by Interreg. It's about climate mitigation in the field of urban mobility, including also the spatial structure as far as it influences the sustainability of mobility. The project offers cities to look at how far are they doing enough at the moment and whether they are achieving their goals with the planned measures. They can creatively live out their ideas without first thinking about whether the politicians will approve it or not. The focus is on the year of climate neutrality and also on major steps to achieve local climate aims. And yes, as I said, on knowing whether the city is doing enough on time. We are doing the scientific part together with the Technical University of Delft, Netherlands, and our 5 partner cities are Almeria in Spain, Bydgoszcz in Poland, Leipzig in Germany, Plymouth, and also Thessaloniki in Greece. The cities define 1 to 2 measure packages with which they achieve their climate targets. The measure packages are our urban scenarios. So the mobility changes caused by these measure packages are presented within the respective urban transport model. And then we use the mobility data of the status quo and these 2 measure packages to calculate the CO2 emissions and the impacts of these measures. And the transport module served as a basis for that. Here are some measures of the 5 cities which they are planning. I don't want to go into much detail, but maybe just good to know or interesting to know the different climate targets. So for example, Leipzig aims to be climate neutral 2050 by 2050, and Plymouth by 2030, and also Thessaloniki just corresponding with national aims of 40% CO2 reduction, which is also, or this heterogeneity is also a problem, or yeah, just for our calculation, but I will come to it later. So now we come to the CO2 calculation in our project. First, to the European Union calculator, to the EU calculator, which is, so to say, the mother of our calculator, because it's a simulation model and was the output of the Horizon 2020 project, the European Union calculator. And it's good to know some backgrounds before I will tell you the details of our calculator. So the EUCalc model is a simulation model driven by people activities in a given context and reflects the impact of using technologies to perform the activities on energy, emissions, socioeconomic impacts, and environment and resources. And the EU calculator model calculates the emissions or the impacts for many sectors, not just transport. And the model starts by assessing the energy demand based on 3 context modules, which are on the top: lifestyle, technology, climate. They each provide contextual data to the activity and impact modules. Then 12 activity modules cover both consumption sectors and energy sectors. And the transport module is one of these activity modules. And to perform these activities, these modules use technologies which compute emissions based on an assessment of the production and consumption of energy, products, materials, and resources. And yes, so as I said, the transport module is based on a bottom-up approach to compute energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions from the transport sector. And that calculation is based on historical data and on projections until 2050, and on the urban scenario, so to say. The transport indirect emissions are addressed by other working packages. For example, the supply module assesses the emissions related to the electricity production, which is in our adapted model included in the module, as we don't have other sectors. And the transport module receives data from the lifestyle module, and which is basically the transport activity, and gives data to other modules. So the main outputs are direct CO2 emissions, energy demand, number of vehicles required and new vehicle sales, so the new technology share in the future, the need for infrastructures, and also the total costs of the system. And as I said, it's lever-based. So here you can see some levers, which, or for our case, the measures of the cities influencing or are influencing these levers. So there are different levels of ambition, level 1, level 2, which is not here shown, but it's there, level 3 and level 4. And level 1 is more or less the status quo. And level 4 is the most ambitious level for the future. So for example, here at the passenger modal share, in level 4, the car modal share is extremely decreasing in comparison to level 1. Now, we come to our adapted transport emission model, and we have separated the transport module of the EU calculator from the rest of the model and worked on it according to our needs in the project. The main thing was to be more city-specific, as the European calculator was on European scale. It's not totally finished because we didn't receive the data from the cities, but the basic structure is in place, and we are, of course, glad about every input. So emissions are a product of transport activities and the energy-specific characteristics of the modes used. So activities times energy are the emissions. The activities of the different modes are indicated in VKM or PKM, and we are at this point we are only using the modes of the passenger transport, but we will of course expand it also to the freight transport. And if activity data cannot be provided because I don't know, some cities didn't have a transport model, we can calculate it approximately with that formula on the top. So the time spent per mode. So for example, you drive 30 minutes average, you drive 30 minutes per day with the car, the average speed of the mode, and then the population. Then we also have on the bottom are some levers, which are also where we also calculated for the future and in different scenarios. So for example, the vehicle efficiency or occupancy rate, if we have an increasing modal share, increasing car sharing, we also have an increasing occupancy rate. And the technology share indicates the percentage share of the drive used. We use diesel, petrol, electric vehicles, hydrogen, plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, diesel or petrol, biofuels and e-fuels. And these values are mostly based on national data. For the future projections, we will of course also take into account changes in energy efficiency that can be assumed. And in addition to CO2 emissions, we also generate other approximate outputs. So for example, the influence of congestion, the need for infrastructure, and the costs that arise from it. And also the future vehicle fleet. And yes, so one of our considerations was also to calculate the costs of congestion. On the one hand, it makes the consequences of congestion more understandable, and on the other hand, it could be interesting also for policymakers. Of course, this also requires an overview of the factors that influence congestion and the costs, as it's the main feature of urban traffic is the stop-and-go traffic. And we have tried to map that with the daily travel time and congestion data from TomTom. And so that's our way how we can show cities the additional costs of the congestion, as we can distinguish between the time or the fuel consumption in free flow, which is without any congestion, and with the fuel consumption in slow flow, which is more or less the actual scenario or the actual situation. And then we also determine the technology share in new vehicle sales. The goal of this calculation step is to update the characteristics of the existing vehicle fleet, taking into account the new vehicle sales. The average lifetime, average energy consumption of vehicles, and the share of each technology in the vehicle fleet will be impacted by new sales and also by new policy instruments. Based on the total fleet characteristics, the energy consumption is computed by type of vehicle. The outputs are of two types, so the characteristics of the total vehicle fleet, average lifetime, average energy consumption, and share per technology, and the total energy consumption per type of vehicle and per type of fuel. And this was really just a brief overview. And if I had enough more time, I had gone into more detail, but nevertheless, a short outlook. So we really need the data of the cities from the traffic model to calibrate our model and also to make the first calculations. At the moment, we created a dummy database to test our model, and we are in a good range, but of course it's we need the real data. And we also want to add health benefits due to active transport, which would bring us a good impact. And if you're interested to see the output also of the if these participating cities are well enough in time, feel free to follow our project 2050 Climb Up City, or just contact me. And thanks for the presentation. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Fabian. That's brilliant. Really, really interesting. A very complicated issue, I feel, on lots of levels. And we someone that can work out all of these really, intersecting technologies is a really, really useful tool. And it's really interesting to mention the mother of it, the EU Calc, but now in a sort of an adapted version, depending city specific, I suppose. So I'll go to my first question, really, and it's from Maria McCann, who's asking, what does your partnership with Plymouth consist of, and how is the calculator being used here, per se?
Yeah, so Plymouth is part of the project. So they're one of the 5 cities. And we help Plymouth to, or not help, but advise or help to test their measures they are planned, because I think they are mostly concentrated on the UK Max transport plan, but also some practical issues, for example, with their transport model. So the city of Plymouth has a transport model, but for that project, they updated its version. So just really good benefits. And they're using, or we are telling the city of Plymouth, okay, these measures are good or are not good enough, or are good enough. And if you want to achieve climate neutral, or if you want to become climate neutral in 2030, you have to do something more, or more ambitious, or not. So we didn't calculate it right now, but that's our team. Yeah,
that's your goal. Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, I think we can have lots of talk and government sort of gestures and people saying this, but to sort of just calculate it and give us some hard quantitative data is really useful. You mentioned that there was some sort of hurdles potentially to collecting data from the different cities. What's the main kind of barrier to data collection across these different cities in your project?
Oh, that's also one of the most interesting things for me in the project, because there are different country-specific data limitations. So, for example, in Leipzig, we have the problem that the population scenarios or the population development is not good enough mapped. So they don't know exactly what's the population in 2030 or 2050, but which influences, of course, the model extremely. And yes, and for example, the transport models. Not each city has a transport model, a traffic model, to compute the mobility changes. And then we help the cities to be more aggregated, like our model is. That some kinds of that. So it's really interesting to see what are some country-specific limitations, and
I think having everyone working from the same kind of format is always key, isn't it, when you do a widespread analysis across Europe, and likewise. We've got another question here from Grant Sherman, and there's Grant says it looks like a very detailed model, and it says, do you have historical data to test your model with existing emission data?
Yeah, so of course that's really important, and we have it right now for some cities, but not for all. For example, Leipzig has very detailed information about it, also Plymouth and some plans, and then my task is to work through all these city plans and which were in the past, and of course, so we have data from 1990 to 2015, and then so at 2015 the future begins in our scenarios or in our model. So
Brilliant. No, that's great. That's I think that's answers your question, Grant. I mean, it's interesting because the technology share that you modeled, whether it's hydrogen or hybrid. I mean, there's so many options. And I often talk to an older colleague of mine who says, "Well, I've got an old BMW that's it's a diesel BMW, but he's kept it running for like 25 years now." And he always, his argument to me is often, "Well, I'm not really interested in an electric car. If I keep this running for the rest of my life," which is quite possible with some German engineering, I'm sure. But there is, it's interesting just how that's calculated in, and you've brought that in your calculator to say, okay, we're going to keep, a sort of a polluting car on the road, but we're not going to build a new one. So I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's also interesting that you're saying that, because, for example, the Polish city, Leipzig is a good example, because the BMW manufacturing is there in Leipzig. So the electric manufacturing, and of course their focus is all on electric mobility. And but on the other hand, the Polish city Bydgoszcz, they say it's not our population can't afford it to buy a new electric vehicle. And so our ambition is more to be more effective, and to be so that the whole transport system is more effective, more efficient. More efficient. And so it's really different. And we also have calculated the costs of new charging points or charging infrastructure. So that's also part. So I also think that it's not so efficient to only have a big focus on electric mobility, as we have first to make our transport system more efficient, for example, with the occupancy rate or vehicle efficiency. So these kinds. So we have, on the one hand, the behavioral changes we have to do, and also the technology changes. So we have to consider both.
I think so. I think, you know, it's not a single approach, is it, to solve these problems? People think we'll just electrify everything, or we'll do everything with hydrogen, but it's a multi-pronged attack to change the way that we live, and it's fascinating. We've got a couple of minutes left. I think really I'd like to end this session really on maybe on yourself a little bit. Like, what's your favorite? I mean, you live in an urban environment, I take it, and what is your favorite? What would be your favorite way to get around in your city?
With the bicycle. So
the bicycle. Is this an e-bike? No.
I don't have an e-bike, but there are so at least I live in Berlin, so there are some operators, for example, share bikes and sharing bikes and all these kinds. But if I had the opportunity to go without car or anything else, just to my work each day, I would use also my bike, but I live 30 kilometers away from my office, so it's for me too hard to bicycle or to cycle each day. But
Well, I built my e-bike, and I live I don't know how many kilometers, but 19 miles from Plymouth. So I cycle 19 miles in, 19 miles home. But without an e-bike, I would probably not be able to work during the day due to it took me 1 hour to cycle this, and Devon's not very flat. So it was really, you need that assistance in some way. Well, I did anyway. I'm not particularly fit, and it probably was about 6 or 7 minutes longer than taking the bus, which was really interesting, from my point of view. So yeah, it depends on the geography and all sorts of things. But no, I'd like to I'd like to thank you very much for coming today. Really interesting talk. I think good luck with your project moving forward, and we'd like to see the results of it very soon. That'd be really great, and nice to hear from you, Fabian. So thanks to everyone that's coming, and thanks, Fabian. Thank you. Great. Okay, I think that's the end of our marketplace session this morning. I'd like to thank everyone for coming. It's been a really, really interesting morning, and I'll see you all tomorrow, this same time, I think. Yeah, great. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody. Cheers. Thank you. Bye-bye.